Hi, I'm Stewart Spinks and welcome to episode 310 of my podcast, Beekeeping Short and Sweet. Well, another week and more rain. I did, however, manage to dodge the showers and checked out a swarm colony that we've been coaxing out of a super and into a brood box. And there's some good news. Beekeeping Short and Sweet, a beekeeping podcast for the inquisitive beekeeper with a short attention span. A beekeeper, in fact, just like me. This week's podcast is sponsored in part by Modern Beekeeping, suppliers of general beekeeping equipment including high-density polyhives. These include Paradise National hives, Swenty polyhives and of course Honeypaw hives, my particular favourite. More than this, Modern Beekeeping also supply traditional cedar and pine hives, a range of very effective bee feeds called Appy Mix and Appy Pasta, and a full range of all the must-have beekeeping equipment for every beekeeper. For all your beekeeping needs, contact Paul at Modern Beekeeping by visiting their website www.modernbeekeeping.co.uk. Hi everyone, it's beekeeping podcast time once more, and I'm back in the office feeling particularly autumnal, and that's not a good thing in the middle of July. The drive in this morning felt more akin to late September. It's just crazy. The season is slipping away, and it really doesn't feel like we've yet had a week where I've not thought about putting a sweater and a rain jacket in the truck with me, and every day they've been needed. Luckily, for the most part, the weather has been showery, meaning we could wait it out in the truck, let the clouds pass by and then dash out, inspect a few colonies before the next showers arrived, scoot back to the truck and repeat. It is the height of the summer nectar flow period, and despite the changeable weather conditions, colonies are getting out and foraging. Supers mostly are filling with honey, and some colonies are at the point of exploding with bees, albeit maybe a month too late. These colonies are most likely destined for the heather, so who knows, it could be a good time for them. Talking about the heather, I'm feeling okay about the way our honey crop is shaping up and the way the bees are progressing, ready for the heather moors. We're certainly not going to break any records this year, though, with our honey production. But I'm more than satisfied that we'll have enough to keep our current stockists' shelves full of our honey and their customers happy with the unique apiary-specific honey that we're able to produce and supply them. That's the beauty of what we smaller beekeeping outfits are able to provide. And by that I mean pretty much everyone here in the UK, I guess, and probably everyone listening to this podcast. For some of you, I have no doubt you're able to extract your honey and identify the exact hive that it comes from. Now, whilst I can't claim to be able to do that, I can be very specific about the apiary the honey has been produced in and the very specific floral makeup of each jar of honey. This, of course, brings me back to the use of microscopes that I turn to most years in the autumn and winter months. If there's one additional bit of kit that I urge you to get yourselves this summer, it's a microscope, if only for pollen identification. As luck would have it, I do have a few here on the shelf that I'm willing to let go, so if you're interested, do get in touch. There's going to be pollen from one specific plant's flower in our honey from one isolated apiary this year, and that's clover. It's very rare that we get a crop of honey that has lots of clover in it. I don't take my colonies to anywhere specifically for a clover honey crop, but every now and then we seem to get lucky, and this year, despite all my moans and groans about the weather, it seems we've had perfect conditions to see a lot of clover grown and flower close to one of our apiary sites. It's at one of the sites where we set our colonies up for the oilseed rape in the spring. These colonies have been left in situ, mainly due to them not being required for the borage or the heather trips. What's happened, I think, and I'm waiting for the farmer to get back to me to confirm it, but I think the farmer has sown a cover crop of clover, or at least a clover mix, to fix nitrogen in the soil. And with the continual rain showers that we've had over the past months, it's allowed the clover to grow exceptionally well, and they've produced lots and lots of flowers, which the bees have been actively foraging. I think, as with a lot of our nectar-giving plants, there seem to be good seasons and, well, not so good seasons. Sometimes they produce nectar, and in some seasons they seem completely devoid of any nectar at all. Fingers crossed that this year it's the turn of clover and we get that light, delicate tasting honey that I can then sample under the microscope and confirm the identity of some clover pollen. That's undoubtedly a video for the winter months. Our little swarm that we collected a short while back at the Fishing Lakes apiary is doing fine. I popped over earlier in the week and fed them some more sugar syrup, and that has all disappeared, so I've topped them up again, and with luck they'll continue to draw out the foundation in the brood box that I've added. In between the showers late last week, I took a few minutes to open up the hive and see how things were progressing. I think I had decided that they were small enough to be a cast swarm and maybe had a virgin queen with them. Well, a virgin or not, recently mated virgin perhaps, either way, our queen in this newly established colony has started laying eggs, and I have everything crossed that we don't have a drone-laying queen. They seem to have been everywhere this summer, if my mailbox is anything to go by. This swarm colony, you'll remember, has a super on the hive floor only because that's where they settled into when they arrived. Above that, I placed a Langstroth brood box filled with foundation, and on top of that, the integrated feeder and roof. Well, we have eggs and very young larvae in some of the cells in the super. And the bees are working the frames of foundation in the brood box to the point that I think the queen will move up from the super into the brood box this week and maybe start laying eggs up there too. My reason for suggesting this is the colony's running out of room in the super, what with the stores being sealed and the queen laying eggs in every available cell that's not occupied with nectar or honey. Above the super, the brood box frames, whilst not fully drawn out, are deep enough for eggs to be laid in. If you've added foundation to any of your own colonies, you might well see the same process. Partially drawn cells on a sheet of foundation, maybe only 2 or 3 millimetres deep, with an egg in them. This is good news as the queen is keen to get laying, but the flip side of this is that if they can't draw out the foundation into complete cells quickly enough, they may well throw up some swarm cells. Swarmy bees produce swarmy bees, remember. In this colony, I did find a couple of charged queen cells, each having an egg in it. Now, these were more in a supersedure position rather than the typical bottom of the frame swarm cell position. It's possible there could be an issue with the queen. Maybe she's not as fit as the colony wants. Whatever the cause of these queen cells, I've decided to leave them. For me, they don't look like swarm cells. Famous last words, I know. But with only 2 queen cells being produced and the position being in the middle of the frame, I think it's likely that they are supersedure cells. Another reason for leaving them is that I think it's a good example hive to show everyone what's happening in real time. We shot a video of the latest inspection and we'll go back to them in a few weeks' time, maybe a couple of weeks, to see what's become of those queen cells and the colony more generally. I'm quite excited, if excited is the right word, quite excited to head back to the borage next week to see how the cut comb and section rack have been coming along. I've had quite a lot of negative comments about how tricky, difficult, or even downright impossible it is to get bees to do as we want and draw out cut comb nice and straight and section squares drawn out evenly and filled to capacity. Now, I can understand the reluctance from beekeepers to try out the section squares in a rack. There is, of course, a cost implication of buying a section rack complete, and the little voice in the back of your head saying, rather pessimistically, that it's all going to end in tears anyway, so why risk that money? Well, that's me too, but I'm always up for a beekeeping challenge, and that's why I try to do these things. I do think the cut comb is going to be completely drawn and ready to come out next time I visit. The section squares, well, I'm not quite so confident about those. However, I have been reading about how to improve my chances with these. I really should get into the habit of reading up on the technique before I try it out. There really isn't any point in trying to reinvent the wheel all over again, is there? I have, however, found some very useful tips on how to prepare the section boxes in a slightly different way that might get them drawn out and filled as we want them. If it works, I'll share my findings with you all in a video series about the section racks and the Ross rounds, another one of these challenges that I need to get to grips with. Another consideration that's rattling around in my mind at the moment is the production of nukes to overwinter. Think multiple plates on sticks, all spinning, if a little precariously. I am focused on now, honestly, but I have one eye on next spring already. Time is slipping away, and I don't want to leave it too late to get these nukes set up. The timing is set to coincide with the end of the main borage flow. We've been busy preparing nuke boxes ready for the work and have another batch of queens arriving from Northumberland honey for these splits. The process is simple enough, and we'll have more than enough frames of brood to go around, as we're also going to carry out a few shook swarms to renew and replace old combs. I'm a big fan of introducing new queens into hopelessly queenless colonies. It just seems to work for us these days, and the key is to make sure these splits or newly formed nucleus colonies are genuinely hopelessly queenless. That takes a little planning and knowing when your queens will be arriving, or if they're home produced, when they'll be ready to go into those nukes. I'm sure our colonies are just like every other beekeeper's colonies, always looking to trip us up at every opportunity, and that means making queen cells when you think you've made it impossible for them to do just that. Here it's all about leaving yourself enough time to set up the nuke and letting the bees attempt to produce those queen cells. Then just give them a few days to build those queen cells into fully formed cells so you can see them all clearly. Sometimes you'll find they hide them in amongst drone brood, so do look at every frame and shake the bees off or brush the bees off to be certain that you've not missed any. I really want frames of sealed brood only, but that can sometimes be hard to find. There always seems to be a corner somewhere that the queen has popped back to and laid a few eggs just before you take that frame out to make up a nuke. That's why it's important to go back in and check. And then check once more when you're about to put in that new queen. My biggest challenge and my biggest concern isn't rogue queen cells, it's those bloomin' late summer wasps. And, not wanting to worry you all, but this week I've seen the first of them. It's like they hide away all summer long, only suddenly to put in an appearance just when I'm making these late summer splits and weakening my colonies ready for them to raid. Well, not this year. I'm ready for them. Ready in as much as I'm going to make sure I have strong splits. It's too easy to try to split too hard from one colony and weaken them to the point of no return. This year, we're only going to split colonies in half and ensure that they have plenty of bees to guard the entrance. That entrance will be reduced to just one bee space, or thereabouts, making it tricky for the bees to get back inside, let alone the wasps. That will make it almost impossible for any wasp to sneak in unchallenged, and I suspect that once the wasps know that they're going to find it difficult to get into the hives, they'll head off to try to find somewhere else to rob. Be warned if you're local to me. This year I won't be feeding the local wasp population with my weakened splits, so look out for wasps heading in your direction and take action. Finally this week, you will all remember my various calamities with the heather honey trip last year, particularly the fact that I didn't visit the site before taking the bees and all the stresses that involved. In my defence, I would say I wasn't given the thumbs up that we could actually take the bees to this location until just a couple of weeks prior to the actual trip. So it wasn't all my fault, honest. Anyway, this year is going to be different, and next week sees my reconnaissance trip to the grouse moors to finalise exact locations and to set out some pallets as hive stands in preparation for the end of the month, or I guess more likely the beginning of August. It will be really interesting to see at what point the heather is at in terms of flowering. Not that I'm any kind of heather expert, you understand, but I am a keen gardener and I can spot how a plant is developing in terms of its flower buds and when they're likely to open. I'm led to believe that heather honey is a rare and tricky honey to produce, and that the seasons vary so much that we could end up with a bumper crop or no crop at all. Add to this the fact that we're mainly taking supers for cut comb, sections and Ross rounds, and you'll understand just how risky this trip could be. Nothing ventured, as they say. Wish me luck, and I'll report back next week. Anyway, that's it for this week. Don't forget to check out my website, www.norfolk-honey.co.uk, and for my latest videos and podcasts with more updates, tips and techniques, it's the same Patreon page, www.patreon.com/Norfolk Honey. And remember, I'm Stewart Spinks, and that was Beekeeping Short and Sweet.